Hello friends, welcome back to another Value Vintage Cards video. In this one I want to talk a little bit about scarcity and some of kind of the alternatives and things that we might not have had on the radar. They weren't on my radar for the last many years, up until I would say the last couple of years I really became aware of the set. And I feel like that's somewhat the evolution of vintage, is you kind of go through the childhood wish list, me being in that 40s range age, just barely creeping up on the 50s. But you start looking at those cards and, the tops, the Bowmans, all those things that were on the wish list, dream list when you were a kid, all of a sudden are a little bit attainable. And as you start to attain a bunch of that, suddenly you start realizing, like, well, what else is out there? And start getting to some of these oddball and unique and, quote unquote oddball, but all these, food issues and kind of subsets. And then you get it deeper into vintage and you go beyond Topps Bowman era and start getting into pre-war and those kinds of things. But I want to pick on this just a little bit, because this would have been, childhood dream list. And of these three, the one I picked up most recently is actually Jim Pearsall, which is kind of funny. But with these three, so we've got the Ted, which I feel like is pretty iconic in the sports card, baseball card community, and rightfully so. I mean, A, it's Ted Williams, and B, it's got a little bit of a unique story to it in that they started the production of the set and then had to pull it because of licensing, contract, all the good stuff. So when you look at Ted, and this was in my SGC reveal video, which was one of my first ones actually, goes all the way back to a couple months ago. That's how new this all is to me. So sorry if I'm repeating within the first couple months of having cards to show, but there's Ted's back. He's card number 66. That's a pristine 1.5. I think it's a nice looking card. Even in a 1.5, that does not offend me whatsoever. Love that card. So great card. When you look at the Jim Pearsall, that had to replace him. So he's also card number 66. I think growing up I always saw that as 66A, 66B. And that always kind of confused me because I was just reading like a price guide. I had no idea what the difference in reason would be. So they took out one Boston guy, put another one in, and Jim Pearsall's solid, but he's not Ted Williams. And then I threw in Mickey Mantle, and it's really for the purpose of this discussion, this short little thought. Definitely not rant, but Mick's actually card number 65. How crazy is that? But the Ted, other than being Ted Williams, is more valuable because it's scarce. So Jim Pearsall is, high-end common, I think. I don't believe he ever was really considered a, price guide worthy player, but good player, solid career, all the stuff. So some folks probably collect him just because he's not insignificant in the sport. But with Ted, when you look at, and I'll confess, I just looked at PSA's pop reports because PSA is about the easiest. There's about 1,400 of those graded. So is that considered scarce? And that's PSA only. That's no SGC, no BVG, no raw. Mine was raw until a couple months ago. When you look at Mickey Mantle, who I always try and compare to the most significant in the set, I think the Mick is probably the biggest card. So Mantle has about 5,000 graded from that set. So it's, call it a fourth, roughly, is out there of Ted, and Ted probably is the biggest in that set. So I suppose if you have a Ted Williams, you're probably sending it in, unless you're weird and you're me. But for the most part, those are pretty heavily graded, and Mickey, I would think, would be too. So, call it 1/4. So the Ted Williams is considered very, very scarce. That is, according to most recent sales, PSA 1.5 just went for a little under $1,000. So call it, pushing a 4-figure card. And there's a lot of sales. I think there was 300 and something of them. So actually, I'm gonna, all the guys would take out. Sorry, Jim. I'm gonna excuse you from the discussion. So pretty scarce by golden age vintage kind of standards. You know, there's 1,400 of them with one grading company, so call it a couple thousand at least. But I also have this one that is actually right in the exact same price point. That one's obviously rough. It's authentic, it's altered. Of all the altering though, I mean, these things generally, had a little blender issue up there. If you're not as familiar with that set, Propaganda Montiel, Cuban issue. So I love this set. I have several now. I do not have enough of a influence to tilt the market, so I have no worries of telling everybody more about that set. But it is definitely one I have a frequent watch on. Every auction I run through and see what's there. Every single eBay watch list, I have that on my watch list. Just curious what's out there, see what things are going for, see what pops up. So Ted, super scarce, had to be pulled, 1,400. This one, Ted, super scarce. I think there's 28 graded with PSA. That's insane. I always say when you talk scarce, are you talking like barely over 1,000, or are you talking like under 50? So to me, scarce, when you start talking about like rare, unique, and really for the same price, you're talking 30 people in your state have this. People watching this video have that card, which is cool. Great card. But there's less than, maybe with SGC and stuff, say there's one per state if there's none owned in a foreign country. That's scarce. That means, and actually I'm in a state that has some premier collectors, so I know that this probably is owned in my state, but that means there's literally states that wouldn't have somebody owning that, because statistically that's how math works. So there should be about 50 of those, would be my assumption. Are all of them graded? Definitely not. Are a few higher grade? Yes. But really, I think you can find a Ted, 6, 7, 8. Maybe there's 9s out there, I'm not sure. I doubt there's a 10, but who knows. When you get into a Cuban issue, and this is authentic altered, a 2 and a 3 is probably considered like, that's that version of a 9 or a 10. They are all gonna be rough. They're put in scrapbooks, they're manhandled, they're a little bit older. You're going from 54 to 46, but that's not the issue. The issue is really where it's coming from and how they were, kind of instructed to keep things. So cards from Cuba, cards from Venezuela, a lot of times they're scrapbooks, they're taped into things. There's, different ways folks were preserving their cards, which we now are regretful of. But that's what, was practiced. It wasn't considered a collectible, it was considered just a fun little thing to look at. So whole different theory. But I just wanted to toss that out there as a kind of a push and a challenge, and also to see like who in the community, like what are you finding? Are you still a Topps Bowman, Leaf is exotic rare collector, or have you kind of jumped into some of the, Red Heart, Bond Bred, Venezuelan, deep pre-war kind of stuff, or where do you fall? So I think for being a playing days Ted, something like that's going to be pretty scarce. That is on my super cool card list. So anytime you can talk down a 54 Bowman, Ted is being less scarce and too mainstream for maintaining your interest. That's kind of cool. So dive into some of those oddballs if you haven't looked. Foreign issues are really, really cool, and just finding things that are truly unique is fun. It's all the journey, it's all the exploration and learning. So I'm glad I learned about this from other folks along the way, and Maybe someone here is seeing that set for the first time, or just maybe reconsidering it if you're familiar with it. So that's about it for today. Just wanted to throw that out there, take a deep dive, find something weird, find something rare, and I will catch y'all on the next video. Have a great one.